Greetings, and welcome to the very first episode of Ray Reads Just for You. I'm your host, Raymond Steers. It's Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022, and it's snowing outside. Today's letter comes from Jennifer Hatch from Missoula, Montana, who describes herself as 32, recently single, 5'6", dark hair, slightly curvy, and a little frisky. Jennifer writes, Dear Raymond, thank you for taking the time to read my letter. All my friends and coworkers seem to have suddenly decided to become artists or poets or musicians or some such nonsense, and quite honestly, I'm growing a little tired of it. My father, rest his soul, was an engineer, and as a young girl, he would read me technical manuals as bedtime stories. My mother was against it and tried to read me fairy tales, but I loved it, and I miss him dearly. So, Mr. Steers, would you please read me something technical? Well, Jennifer, I'd be delighted. Now let's see what we have on the old bookshelf. Historical novel, poetry, cinematography, espionage, mystery, aviation. Here we are. Technical. So, this is just for you, Jennifer, starting on page 217. Friction. Friction is the resistance that is encountered when two solid surfaces slide or tend to slide over each other. The surfaces may be either dry or lubricated. In the first case, when the surfaces are free from contaminating fluids or films, the resistance is called dry friction. The friction of brake shoes on the rim of a wheel is an example of dry friction. When the rubbing surfaces are separated from each other by a very thin film of lubricant, the friction is that of boundary or greasy lubrication. The lubrication depends, in this case, on the strong adhesion of the lubricant to the material of the rubbing surfaces. The layers of the lubricant slip over each other instead of the dry surfaces. A journal, when starting, reversing, or turning at a very low speed under a heavy load, is an example of the condition that will cause boundary lubrication. Other examples are gear teeth, especially hypoid gears, cutting tools, wire drawing dies, power screws, bridge trunnions, and the running in process of most lubricated surfaces. When the lubrication is arranged so that the rubbing surfaces are separated by a fluid film and the load on the surfaces is carried entirely by the hydrostatic or hydrodynamic pressure in the film, the friction is that of complete or viscous lubrication. In this case, the frictional losses are due solely to the internal fluid friction in the film. Oil ring bearings, bearings with forced feed of oil, pivoted shoe-type thrust bearings operating in an oil bath, hydrostatic oil pads, oil lifts, and step bearings are instances of complete lubrication. Incomplete lubrication takes place when the load on the rubbing surfaces is carried partly by fluid viscous film and partly by areas of boundary lubrication. The friction is intermediate between that of fluid and boundary lubrication. Incomplete lubrication exists in bearings with drop feed, waste-packed, or wick-fed lubrication, or on the guides of a crosshead. Well, Jennifer, I do so hope you enjoyed today's reading, but I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. I'm your host, Raymond Steers, and this has been Ray Reads Just for You.